Today we are going to write the equation of a circle when given the diameter of the circle. And I don't mean the length of the diameter, I mean the coordinates of the endpoints of the diameter. So I'm going to explain that more in a minute. Before I get into that with the diameter and the next standard, I want to review what we've done the last couple days because completing the square is tricky. So let me try and explain it to you like this. Start with 4 plus 3 equals 7. Everybody knows the left-hand side of the equation is equal to the right-hand side of the equation on this problem. Now, one of the key concepts to completing the square is adding the same thing to each side of the equation. So that's why I gave you something simple so you can see that if we add 5 to each side of the equation, it's still equal. It's 12 equals 12 instead of 7 equals 7. As long as it's equal, it's equal. So that's called the addition equality property. You can add the same thing to each side of an equation and your equation's still equal. So, with that being said, let me go into factoring because completing the square is basically you have to know how to factor. So, this is review from last year. Say we're going to factor x squared plus 8x plus 15. You're going to look for two numbers that multiply to give c, which is your constant, 15, and add to give the b term, 8. So what are those two numbers? They're 3 and they're 5. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 plus 5 is 8. So this would factor into x plus 3 times x plus 5. Now let's look at this next example. What two numbers multiply to give 16 and add to give 4? Well, it's not two different numbers. It's the same number twice. It's 4. It's 4 times 4 is 16, and it's 4 plus 4 is 8. So you guys see the difference between these two? In the first one, it's just a regular factoring. In the second one, our parentheses are exactly the same. So we basically have x plus 4 squared. We have it twice. We're multiplying the same thing together, so we're squaring it. And that's the objective of completing the square. You want to figure out what does my c term need to be so that I can have the same number multiply to give c and add to give 8. So that might look like x squared plus 10x plus 25, or x squared plus 12x plus 36, or it might look like x squared plus 14x plus 49. What do all these have in common? They're all perfect square trinomials. They're all going to factor with the same number multiplying to give c that adds to give b. This would be 5 times 5 is 25, 5 plus 5 is 10. This is 6. 6 squared, 6 plus 6, 7. 7 squared, 7 plus 7. So if I give you the next number in the pattern, 16x, what are we going to add to it? Well, to figure that out, you take half of 16 and you square that number. Half of 16 is 8. 8 squared is 64. So that's completing the square. Completing the square means complete the perfect square trinomial. It means figure out what the c term needs to be. And that's what you're doing in these problems is you're figuring out what that c term needs to be and you're just adding it to the equation. But when you add it to the equation, don't forget to add it to the other side as well, and those numbers are going to end up being your radius squared. So let's put this to a real problem here. This is equations of a circle's worksheet. So this is problem number 4. You guys have already done this problem. All right, we're going to try and complete the square here, but we're going to have to do it twice. That's the thing about these problems. And then in that last example and all these problems here, we're only completing the square once. Now we have to complete the square twice. We have to complete it for our x squared and our x, and we have to complete it for our y squared and our y. So it's kind of like two problems in one. That's why we end up adding two numbers to the left-hand side of the equation and two numbers to the right-hand side of the equation. One is to complete the x's and one is to complete the y's. But before we do that, we have to get this in order. So put your x's together. So I'm going to say x squared plus 2x. Put your y's together. Plus y squared minus 24y is equal to negative 120. So all I did is rearrange the terms on the left, and then 24y was on the wrong side of the equation, so I had to bring it over by subtracting it over. That's why it becomes a negative 24y. Now I can start completing the squares with my x's. So I look at my b term. What is half of 2? Half of 2 is 1. You square 1 and you get 1, so we have to add a 1 to this side of the equation for our x's. And how do we complete the square for our y's? Well, we look at our b term, the term in front of just regular old y, and that's negative 24, and half of negative 24 is negative 12. And when we square negative 12, we get positive 144. So we're also going to add 144 to the left-hand side of the equation. So since we've added 1 and 144, we have to add that to the other side of the equation as well. And 144 and 1 is 145. So we're adding 145 to the other side of the equation. And negative 20 plus 145 is equal to 25. So the right-hand side of our equation is equal to 25. Now we're almost there. Now we know to factor a perfect square trinomial, the number that goes in our parentheses is just half of the b term, which we've already found. That's 1 for this one, and it's negative 12 for that one. So we have x plus 1 squared plus y minus 12 squared. So that's factoring our perfect trinomials. Think of that as one problem. How do you factor x squared plus 2x plus 1? It's x plus 1 times x plus 1, x plus 1 squared. How do you factor y squared minus 24y plus 144? It's x minus 12 squared. It's y minus 12 times y minus 12. Two things, exact same things being multiplied together, you're squaring it. The y minus 12 twice in a row is y minus 12 squared. And 25 is radius squared, because the equation is everything squared in the equation. So the standard form of the equation of the circle gives you the radius in its squared form. So you would just leave it like that. If the question was, what's the center and what's the radius of this circle, you would have to take the square root of 25 to come up with the radius. But for the homework, that's as far as you had to go. Just put it in the standard form. You square the radius, that's standard form. So you're good. So that's what we've been doing the last couple days. Now, today we're going to write the equation of a circle when we're given the coordinates of the endpoints of a diameter. So, for example, here's a circle with a diameter. I'm just going to make up some numbers. I'm going to say this is 3, 5, and this is negative 7, 1. So I'll say those are the coordinates of the endpoints of my circle. Now we have to write an equation of the circle from this information. That's all you're going to be given. So how do you write the equation of a circle if you're not completing the square? You got to know two things. You have to know what is your center and what is your radius. Once you have that, you can plug them into the equation and you're done. So how do we find the center? Well, the center is going to be exactly in between the endpoints, because the center is the center. It's the middle. It's right in the middle of the circle. It's right in the middle of the diameter. So how do we figure out what point is right in the middle of the diameter? Well, we figure out how far did it take us to get from one endpoint to the other. How far over and how far up? How far over did we go from negative 7 to 3? We went 10 spaces. And how far up did we go from 1 to 5? We went up 4 spaces. So if we want to find out where the center is, we just go half that far. We go over 5 and up 2. So we're going to go over 5 and up 2. Over 5 and up 2 from negative 7, 1. So over 5 from negative 7 is negative 2, and up 2 from 1 is 3. So our center is at negative 2, 3. So we have half the information that we need. We're at negative 2, 3 as our center. And you could have started from the right and went over 5 spaces from 3, and that takes you to negative 2, and go down 2 spaces from 5, and that takes you to 3. So it doesn't matter what endpoint you start from, as long as you're going over and up or down half the distance that you did to get from one point to the next. All right, so the radius, we're almost there. The radius is just Pythagorean theorem, and you've already built 2/3 of the triangle. You've already built the 5 and the 2. We just need to know what that hypotenuse is. So it's 5 squared plus 4 squared is 29. So radius squared is 29, that means the radius is the square root of 29. Radius squared is equal to 29. So you really don't have to find the radius, I guess. You really just need to know what radius squared is, because that's what the equation is. So if you want to just use 29 for radius squared, and if they're not specifically asking you what the radius is, you don't have to take the square root of it. So radius squared in center goes into the equation like this: x plus 2 and y minus 3. You guys seem to be getting the hang of that, where you take your center and you change the sign when you put it in the equation. So negative 2 becomes positive 2, positive 3 becomes negative 3, and then it's equal to r squared, which is 29. So that's the equation of that circle with those endpoints. And you have 8 problems in today's work. 4 of them are, or maybe there's only 6. Whatever it is, they're all the same. They're all find the equation of a circle given the endpoints of the diameter, and there you go. That's how you do it. So hopefully it works for you.